Hello folks, it's David Connolly here, complete with pop screen, and hopefully that will make me sound a bit better today. Listen, within the last 48 hours, two very heavy things have happened, actually a lot more than terrorism and everything, but a couple of events that I'd like to discuss today. One is a person very, very close to my inner circle had a stroke within the last 48 hours. Specifically the blood flow at the back of the brain where it joins onto the spinal cord had some kind of blockage, and she now has her brain's no longer able to communicate with her body, which means that she essentially has locked-in syndrome. I believe, based on what I've heard, that she's able to squeeze a person's wrist, but she cannot talk, cannot move. I'm not even sure if she can breathe unassisted. And it's a very, very, very heavy thing, you know. If you've ever watched Breaking Bad and you've seen the character Hector Salamanca in the wheelchair and all he can do is ring the bell, that's pretty much what locked-in syndrome is. And in extreme cases, people can't even ring a bell. Sometimes they're not even able to blink. But those who have had this and have been able to communicate, maybe by moving an eye or squeezing somebody's wrist, they have communicated that when you have this locked-in syndrome, it's like being buried alive. I mean, your brain is totally functional, 100%. You're completely alert, totally on the ball and everything, but you are disconnected from your body. It's a challenge to imagine a more horrific thing. Anyway, that's what's happened to somebody pretty close to my life within the last 48 hours. But also, it's interesting because yesterday the great TV entertainer Bruce Forsyth died, you know. And I was never a huge fan or anything, but I always thought he was kind of funny. He was a guy who was on the TV for many, many decades in the UK, and I'm smiling because he was a funny guy and he was witty and he's worth checking out, you know. But he died, right? And it's headlines on all of the newspapers and websites and everything. Bruce Forsyth, Brucey has died. But you know what's interesting? I could not find one single article that said why he died. And in fact, all they're saying is he was 89 years old, right? So people are like, well, you know, he died of old age, right? Well, there we go. Well, actually, I think that we need to change the language that we use. It's really time for us to change the way that we think about medicine and illness and even death, because let me tell you something. There's no such thing as dying from old age. There's no medical condition out there called old age and it comes along and you die from it. It just does not happen. And I think that we, the human race, need to start changing the language that we use when it comes to death and illness and everything. I want to know why he died, okay? I would like to know, why did Bruce Forsyth die? It's not good enough to say old age. What was it? Was it his lungs? Was it a heart attack? What was it? Now, if we can start speaking about these problems, then it's going to change the way that we think about these problems, and we can start looking at them like engineering challenges instead of all being resigned to this fatalistic nightmare that we're all living in, right? Now, the other point I want to say kind of quickly is, as far as I can tell, the medical community are letting us all down in many respects. Now, don't get me wrong, there's lots of nice things happening and everything, and I've got a friend phoning in just a second. He got a new hip the other day and he's as happy as can be. There's a lot of good things going on, but there are certain things or certain areas where the medical community and the drugs industry have just failed us all, okay? An example is depression. Right now, millions and millions of people are taking antidepressants and they simply do not work, okay? The drugs do not work. I have a friend, Nicky, who was on antidepressants for 10 years. Now, I'm not going to say that I cured him, but I gave him some advice. I said, why don't you try taking this and do this and do this? I gave him very simple advice, and within 1 week, his life has been transformed. He's back, better than ever, Nicky 2.0. It's an incredible thing, and maybe I can bring him on and tell you about that. But the thing is, his breakthrough happened because he spoke to me. Okay? 10 years of antidepressants achieved nothing. And in fact, they caused huge problems. When you look at these terrible killing sprees that have been happening in schools and all of that, then guess what they've all been taking? The killers. Other areas where the medical community fails us is there's certain types of illness and affliction where the medical community just kind of goes, oh well, tough luck. An example is blindness, okay? Do you see any teams of doctors running about frantically saying, holy cow, Stevie Wonder's blind, man, we need to fix him. We need to fix him now. It doesn't really happen. Another one is paralysis, as has happened to this dear person in my life. The medical community has a tendency to kind of go, well, you're paralysed, tough luck, maybe somebody in the future will figure out stem cell research, who knows, bye, how many people have been told today that they have terminal cancer, and the funny thing occurred to me that this is not how the IT community works. Now, if you're watching this video, there's a good chance that you're a web developer or a programmer, or you're somehow interested in IT, right? Lots of the people who come here are. Well, let me tell you something. You should be very, very proud, because you are part of a community that works differently. In this community, we don't say, sorry, your shopping cart's not working, it's a terminal. We don't say that. How many times have you stayed up and tore yourself apart trying to solve problems? How many times? How many times have you been drifting around forums and reading and watching videos, and you never take no for an answer? That's how we work. This is the community that is different. This is the community that sends rockets into space, that invents the iPhone, the internet, you name it, it's all happening here. We solve problems and we invent incredible stuff. As a matter of fact, looks like we're just about to replace the combustion engine. Who would have thought? Hallelujah, yes, the IT community is awesome. This is the community that makes things happen. And I believe that it is time for the IT community to get involved in medicine. Now, don't patronize me by telling me that there's a couple of doctors or a couple of boffins at Harvard or something and they've learned a bit of Python, okay? I'm not impressed. You see that big, huge intellect that's on YouTube and the 100,000 people watching all of these videos on the top 10 frameworks and stuff, and all those people going to Udemy and all of that. You see that big, massive intellect? That is what I'm talking about, right? And it is time for that crowd to start tackling medical problems. The medical community are not up to the job. The food and drugs industry, totally corrupt. Do you know that there's a panel of 11 people in America who, when a drug comes out, they review it and they decide if it's going to be FDA approved. And only if it's FDA approved does it get embraced widely by the American population, and then that trickles down to the UK and the rest of Europe. And is it any surprise to learn that that panel of people who approve the drugs is made up of people who have interests, shares, and all sorts of deals, sometimes covert and sometimes overt, with the drugs manufacturers? The system is totally corrupt. And in fact, everything that we have been told about things like depression, things like weight loss, even things like how much sleep do you need, even the basics, everything that we have been told is wrong, okay? And I believe It is time for the IT community to step in. You don't have any qualifications? Who gives? Who cares? Steve Jobs never had any, neither did Bill Gates. As a matter of fact, neither have I, okay? That stuff doesn't matter. It is time for the IT community to get involved. We are at such an incredible moment in history, folks. Right now, there's a big tsunami coming in. I've mentioned this before. It's the AI revolution. Right now, you can head on to Udemy or even go to Steph Mischuk, get his Python course. It's peanuts. The guy selling it is far too cheap. It is ridiculous. You can be learning that tonight, and as soon as you get that down, you can be on TensorFlow using Google's neural network. Tonight, you could do that, okay? So I think it's time for us to start thinking in those terms and stop babbling on about the best framework. Let's do some real problem solving. I'm up for it, and who's with me?